This is a memoir of my life as a camera person. There's all kinds of evidence, different forms of evidence of that. So sometimes it's in the footage, sometimes it's in the choices.
Careful.
Sometimes it's in my voice. This is so good. Sometimes it's in my hand coming in front. Yeah, it's good. So you could argue, of course, I'm in every frame of the film, and yet my absence, my invisibility, my fragmentedness, my partialness, all of that is also in the film.
I think a lot of documentaries, a lot of films are very linear. You know, you understand where you're going. And I think the fact that this film is trusting the audience so much with their ability to analyze, interpret, read something new is a blessing to the audience. And I think people actually want films that challenge them.
Kirsten definitely is a really gifted cinematographer and known as such in our world because she brings humanity to that position. And that, I think, is why what we experience through her lens feels so human and real.
I went to Afghanistan in 2009. Amanda Law is the editor, and I made first a short film for the school foundation, and Amanda said, I think there's a real film here. And I sort of didn't dare even hope that, but when she encouraged me, I said, okay, yeah, let's make something. And I was thinking about it being a film around ideas of visibility and invisibility because of the life of women in Afghanistan, because I am a woman cinematographer.
When she was in Afghanistan, she had met this girl, this teenage girl, and they had become good friends. This girl had been her translator. She had a very bright, beautiful presence. The translator introduced her to a young boy named Najib, who was blind in one eye, and he became blind when a Taliban missile exploded near him and killed his brother. She shot with the translator and with Najib. She came back, we cut and cut. Then she went back to Afghanistan and she interviewed them both again, and then we cut and we cut. At a certain point, the translator told Kirsten that she couldn't be in the film anymore.
She said, please don't show my face in this film. And we said, okay. She said, you can use my voice.
If they come back, I have to stop going to school.
And you can use shots of me moving in space, but just don't show my eyes. What was so incredible was that we lost the film. The loss of her gaze meant the end of that film.
We weren't just devastated, I think, because we lost the film. We were also devastated because the girl had been so optimistic about her future life. And when she said that she was afraid, it was like she was a different girl.
When we had to stop making the film we were making, I was like, I want to say what I want to say with the material. And the sort of loss and pain of having filmed things that you love that never make it into movies of other people. I wanted to address that in some way. So that was the beginning of the need. The need to be a director, the need to use the material I had filmed in the ways I wanted to use it.
Good, so you putting the camera lens on too? Thanks, guys. You guys are so good at putting things away.
By this point, I've had children. Viva and Felix were born in January of 2012. So they're born right after a blind eye sort of falls apart. So I have newborn babies, and I'm trying to figure out how can I rebuild this thing that has been lost. 2011, 12, 13, Laura Poitras and I are working on a surveillance film. We don't know yet what it is about, but we go to Brazil and film with Glenn Greenwald. We get access to Julian Assange. We are living in a sort of climate of paranoia, curiosity, fear around what we're doing. And simultaneously with that, I went to Damascus in the spring of 2011. And concurrent with this moment of all of the changes happening in the Middle East that was originally called the Arab Spring, many people who I knew who were American or European journalists who were covering these stories were also experiencing these events as the person who comes in and then is part of this changing landscape. So Lindsay Addario, who I'm close to, is kidnapped in Libya. Basil al-Shaddad, who was a young Syrian student. He filmed his own death. He was running across the street, filming, and a sniper shot him. Tim Hetherington, who I knew only through a handful of conversations, but who I really knew through his work, is killed in Libya. His film, Diary, which is a purely visual film in which he uses footage that he shot. He had found this formal way to talk about what we who go in and out of all of these worlds experience. This film was initially completely thrilling to me, but then when he was killed, I was rather devastated both by his death and by the loss of a person who could express what he had expressed.
I make pictures to try to understand what is happening there for myself.
This is the context in which I am thinking about how to salvage the film I shot in Afghanistan, and I'm trying to create something new. You are seeing the moment they realize they're being filmed. Anyone can look like this: startled, curious, hostile. I wrote this very pretentious voiceover, and I talked about all these ideas that I think about. That sort of is the Chris Marker cut, right? It's the aspirational to Chris Marker cut. There were some things in it that I loved, where I talked about the past, present, and future. And I said, that's an idea I care about. I care about visibility, invisibility. I care about the past, present, and future. I care about eyes. I care about, like, so it's like adding this sort of a list of the things I cared about. I'd been filming inside a camera store. I marveled at the photo of an eye taped on the wall. The caption said that the name of Allah had appeared in Arabic script on a young man's eyeball. It was considered a miracle.
We made something that was still very lovely, a whole other movie that went to the Sundance Sound Lab, and from there it got into the Sundance Doc Edit Lab.
The eyes are ripped out of the image of a woman candidate for parliament on a billboard. Why did they rip out her eyes? Who can I find to interpret the meaning of that?
The universal response to it was that the movie should really be more intimate Kirsten's experience as a camera person in the world.
There were editors I really respect, like Joe Beanie and Mary Lampson and Jonathan Oppenheim, who said, what is going on with this movie? It's a total mess, and you are obscuring yourself in this film. Who are you trying to be? What are you trying to make? It doesn't make any sense. And it made me cry. Like, I thought I was getting close. I thought I was getting to something. And I remember just like weeping. And then for some reason, I told the story of filming the truck that dragged James Byrd Jr. to his death. And everyone said, do you have other stories like that? And I said, oh yeah, I got a lot more stories like that. And so I went and I looked at the tape. The real surprise was to see the face of the prosecutor talking about the book of photos of James Byrd.
One look at that picture and you realize how painful it must have been and how much torture was involved.
And to see the chain. And both of those immediately spoke to me on the level of invisibility, visibility, what's possible to film, how do you show the pain of others, what's an indelible image, all these questions that were filling me up. And that's when I said to myself, okay, now I want to see the Kano footage. Now I want to see the footage of the baby in Kano.
Kirsten started this process by doing a lot of interviews with me into a recorder. I would blindfold her sometimes so that she could go deeper into the thought process. We talked about all the stuff that she had experienced, her relationship with her mom, memories of her mother, memories of being on the road, things that she had felt and experienced that were still with her.
She created a safe space in the edit room for me to go down every rabbit hole, to say things out loud that I wouldn't say publicly.
You know, when I came into the film, really before Kirsten, I think, had sorted out what she was going to be making, she sort of landed on my door with some notion that maybe she could use all the footage from all the films she shot. She was very much going through something. This was a journey happening in real time, her processing all of her experiences and simultaneously trying to make a film.
Marilyn and Kirsten started collecting all of the footage that Kirsten had shot over the years, and it turned out that a lot of those things that did not end up in the films were traumatic. The footage ranged from like personal films of Kirsten's mother deep in her battle with Alzheimer's, and this really horrible, sad footage of a baby being born at the worst maternal mortality ward in Nigeria. So there was a lot of footage.
We then worked on cutting it together. So there was voiceover, there was storytelling, there was the actual voice of the young woman from Afghanistan, and she was the thread of the film. But then we added the Kano footage, and we added the James Byrd footage. We added the Bosnia rape victim footage. It was literally every piece of footage that was the most traumatic to me. And it was a 2.5 hour long cut.
I remember I watched the majority of the film like this. It was so painful. It was a lot of genocides, a lot of rape, a lot of very sick babies being born. It was actually overwhelming. And when the lights came up on that cut, the first thing I said to Kirsten was, please tell me you have a therapist, because I knew that as a producer and a friend, I did not know how to help her through that. Like, she had seen so much and had put so much into herself. I think this was the first time she ever allowed herself to kind of turn it all inside out and let it see the light of day. And it was heavy, and it was scary. It was scary because that could not be a film.
Seeing the trauma cut was a total shock to my system and a total revelation to me. It made me think that I didn't know myself, and that I had somehow, by making this, shown something to myself about a need that I had or about who I was. And, you know, I was freaked out. I was like, am I a post-traumatic stress case? Like, what's going on? How could I have done this?
Marilyn is very smart. I mean, she could see from the screening, maybe it was time to take a step back from the film. And I also felt like it was time to take a step back from the film.
I felt like Amanda and I had gone to the ends of every possible earth we could imagine. And we had lost all of our perspective. And we've been doing it for years and doing it by ourselves.
It was really clear Kirsten had not allowed herself to grieve over what had been lost in the film she lost and in her process of doing her work. You know, there was a lot coming to the surface. The odd thing was I walked in and said, stop, let's stop making a film for now and think about making a film for now. And it was about 10 months.
When Kirsten came to me to work on the project, the greatest and most appealing thing was that she really had achieved a state of zen about it, where she was wide open about the possibilities. She knew that we wanted to kind of start from scratch in some sense, to wipe the slate clean and build something from everything that had been assembled. And she knew very clearly the kinds of things that she wanted to address. She wanted to talk about ethics. She wanted to talk about relationships. She wanted to talk about what it means to be a person, a thoughtful person behind the lens.
So with Marilyn and Nels together, we came up with this working methodology that was, I wouldn't tell him too much about what I thought certain footage meant. I would just say, this matters to me. Take a look at it and see what you see in it.
In June of 2015, I got the drives from Kirsten. I work on the West Coast here in Oakland, and Kirsten is based in New York. And so she mailed the drives out to me. And we agreed that we weren't going to talk too specifically about what was on them. She was going to give me a very general idea of what the material consisted of, and then I'd watch it and see what emerges. As I was watching the footage, I was just struck by how gorgeous each of these scenes that she had shot were, and how much emotion and connection there was between the shooter, Kirsten, and the subject. And they began to stand out as units of their own. There was enough going on between her and the subject that we could make this work without narration. And this is really unusual. I watch a lot of footage from a lot of shooters. There is rarely the depth of connection that Kirsten seems to establish with her subjects all the time. With that in mind, I began to edit.
So Nels went away for 6 weeks and sent back a cut. He was in San Francisco, and it was Danielle, Kirsten, her dad, and me. And so we shut the lights, and what we saw was the beginning structure of Cameraperson, long clips of a specific scene. He had put the titles on at that point. We sort of knew when, where, and what. And it was 40 minutes of these scenes strung together.
I think I started crying almost immediately. And I cried through the entire cut. It was thrilling. On a formal level, it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. It felt alive, and it was working. Our conceit of no voiceover giving a way for us to be close to me was working. You thought about me as you were watching other people. It was giving us the sort of film school, this is how you do it, tools to talk about what a camera person does. And here's how I am not crazy. Here's how I am actually a person who's optimistic, who loves the world, who enjoys my work. He showed me the evidence of it.
You know, we had so much sadness and grief in the trauma cut, and he brought the beauty back, the laughter back. He showed her what she did in the world.
And what Nels brought into that cut was Kirsten laughing at the flowers and looking at blueberries, and this really beautiful side of herself that she was not, intentionally going to bring into the film, hadn't she had someone else do that for her.
But then all of a sudden we were like, yeah, but it's only 40 minutes long and there's no ending. How are you gonna finish this film?
We didn't have much of Kirsten on camera at all. But her presence emerges when you watch the footage closely.
Is the haze working for you? Not loving it.
Not loving it, but we're getting pieces of stuff that don't have haze.
Okay, good.
We began to understand that those tiny moments at the edges of the subject of the film were where her relationship with this film could come from. So we mined hundreds of hours of footage for these tiniest things. The best example is the sneeze in the title sequence. Normally, you would cut the sneeze out, but That's something that clearly goes in this film. And I mean, in essence, we were making an outtake reel, but it was a very thoughtful and emotional and revealing outtake reel.
Wait, stop. Can you? It's not. You can't. It's too. Yeah, all right.
I look confused.
We went back and forth and deliberated a lot about which scene to open the movie with. But we wanted something that was not too specific in a way.
He's saying stop. I think he's saying stop. Get out of here.
No, I can't.
We tried the scene in Sanaa where the driver, Kirsten and Laura Poitras, are going to film a prison.
Yes, they are calling us.
Yeah.
مرحبا. ايش؟ Okay.
When that opened the film, the whole film felt like it was going to be a thriller. And the audience's experience of what came after that was, it was the wrong setup.
Yeah, it's pretty. Through that yellow flower. There's amazing wildflowers here.
And we found that the more subtle the opening scene was, the more it would ask the audience to engage. So in that scene in Bosnia, you hear Kirsten behind the camera, you feel the camera moving around, you get a sense for what she's doing, and it says a lot about what her role is, but it does it in a very hands-off way. We knew that if the audience could begin with that, they might understand how to read the rest of the film.
We wanted to find a way for the audience to experience as much of what I experience as I do. So, you know, one of the things I experience is I go to different places and I return from a place and I go to another place, sometimes, you know, within 24 hours, so that you have these hard juxtapositions of realities. What we did in creating the structure of the film was that trust the audience, give the audience the tools to understand who I am, give the audience the access to the range of experience, give the audience what it means to be physically present, what it means to be present in a duration of time.
We knew then that our challenge was to create something in the realm of story that would draw the audience in and keep them interested in what was coming next. And one technique that we hit upon pretty quickly was simply the setup payoff structure, that when something emerges early in the film, if you begin to come back to it, that creates a really satisfying it creates a really satisfying story experience for the viewer, that there's a relief to coming back to something you recognize. The best example is the scene with the boxer. You know, he's training, he's getting ready for a fight, and we march him out and into the boxing ring, and we just hold off there. When the scene comes back towards the very end of the film, the boxer is finished with the match. We don't show the match at all.
I'm working fucking hard!
But we see his amazing and personal response to what happened in the ring.
Fuck!
It's one of the most immediate scenes I've ever seen where the subject is engaged in a physical relationship with the camera person. It's extremely dangerous feeling. And then it has this ending where he goes and is looking for his mother, and it ends with a hug that, in essence, wraps up a lot of the themes that are going on in this film.
Great job. Look at me. You should have had that. Don't get mad. There's a lot of people watching. Control yourself. Let's go in the back.
She was very keen from the beginning that, you know, this isn't just footage. This is an experience. This is my relationship with that person in the footage. It's my relationship with the other people around that footage. The process of going through who owned what material was very deep. It often involved her having long, you know, hours of conversations with different directors on what that was like. And it was really, you know, I don't know if it was therapeutic, but it was revisiting in a deep and meaningful way these questions that she had, and oftentimes sharing those questions with the directors.
I think it's also a credit to who Kirsten is and how she moves through the world that every single director agreed to give her that material to use in the film free of charge. And that being the least of it, right? They let her use this material in the film. Many of them handed over drives of raw material and said, do what you wish.
I'm sick of this. I feel like I'm gonna get punished, but I'm sick of it.
Kathy had desperately wanted the footage of her angry, throwing the papers across the room in her movie, and it couldn't work in her film. And she and I both could not believe the sign from her mother of the snow falling off the roof.
That was crazy.
We couldn't believe that didn't make the movie. So when she knew I was making this film, she was like, can that get in the movie? You know, we both were really excited about that.
Kirsten has an ability to pick out the right person to be shooting in any situation, to pick out the person who has something going on in their mind is really her great skill. And that's what happened with the grandmother in Bosnia. And it's because I think she reminded Kirsten of her own mother. And I think that's pretty clear from the film.
When we went to Wyoming, to her ranch where she'd grown up as a child, I knew she had Alzheimer's. I knew we were losing her, and I was sort of skittishly filming her, not filming her, turning the camera on, turning the camera off. You know, many frames of that footage only last for not more than 20 seconds because I'm so nervous about filming her.
You got me.
My mother was a photographer. In the portraits she did of people, people were very composed and they are very posed. I often, as a child in some ways, felt the way my mother posed for photos was not exactly true to who she was because it was so posed and performative.
It would have been our furniture in here. There was a swing that used to be right there.
So what do? Of course, you know, the child expressing the unconscious wishes of the parent. I go out into the world and photograph ugliness, disturbing things, violence, war, poverty, and say, look at it, 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 look at it. So my mother had always made it really clear when I started becoming a filmmaker and a camera person, she didn't want to be filmed by me.
It was as her mother began to be affected by Alzheimer's that she both opened up a little bit to the camera and also was less clear on what exactly was happening even. So it was a tough balance for her as to whether to shoot it at all, and then whether to include it in this film was difficult.
I had been filming in Sudan and had come home, and it was just so clear to me that she was gonna disappear sometime soon, and I couldn't believe it, and I happened to have a camera with me, and it felt like total transgression, but I was like, I don't care. I'm breaking all my rules. I'm not being a decent person. I'm just filming her because I love her, and I'm gonna lose her. What I find extraordinary is it's all in that footage. All the layers of everything are all present in that very brief couple of minutes of footage, which is what happens when you're a camera person. You're following a story, you don't know what the story is. And somehow you gather this evidence that then deep, deep, deep into the edit of a film, an editor says, oh my goodness, it's all there.
Well, don't take a picture when your hair's messed up.
Can you fix it? There we go.
Her relationship to me, don't film when your hair's a mess. You couldn't make it up. That is the physical manifestation of the conflict I always had with my mother. Every aspect of our relationship is in that footage. The transgression, the love, the conundrum, it's all there. You know, in the aliveness of this film, obviously this film was about me processing my mother's death over and over in many different ways, and her mattering to me in many different ways. So then when we got to the point of doing the sound mix, I had an incredible experience at the Sundance Skywalker Labs with Pete Horner. We got to watch the film in that really big space at Skywalker. My mom was just sort of giant on this screen. Pete said, "This isn't powerful enough." He's like, "Will you leave me alone a little bit to work on this?" Then I went in and I would come in and watch a version where she'd get knocked over by the wind one way. And he'd say, "Right now I have 9 different types of wind." And then he would add another level. So just literally watching my mother like disappear over and 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 over. And then he was like, "Leave, really leave now for a little while." And I went and I was away and I came back in and he blew my mom out of the world.
The last shot in the film is a bit of a breather for the audience. We've gone with Kirsten through her mother's death. We've gone with her through dozens of horrific events in the world. And it's terrifically emotional. But part of this story was always about what Kirsten's career is and what her life is like. And what she has to do after every one of these emotional events is go out there and film again. And that last scene just had this lovely kind of palate cleansing effect that you can see humanity in its most real and most mundane.
Films often feel birthed, but that film, more than any other, like she just needed to let it cook for a while so that when Nels came on and Danielle and Kirsten, we all kind of got going, it really went. I mean, it was ready. It was ready, which was shocking. I mean, after all those years, for it to be that fast was
Yeah, I think we all were very surprised with this, like submitting to Sundance. We did not think that would happen, but it happened.
We literally went to Sundance. You know, in my mind, we had 4 people who believed in the film and who liked the film, and maybe that would be all, which is a really interesting feeling because I could own it. I loved the film, but I was very unsure that anyone else would understand it or that it would resonate with anyone.
I spend months watching the film as a filmmaker, as an editor, and trying to see it through the eyes of the audience. But when I actually sit down and watch the finished film, it's extremely emotional. I cry at the smallest thing. It just tears roll down my cheeks, and all of the emotions are way over heightened. I mean, the movie is intense, but I was crying at everything. And this always happens with me. It's a strange release for me from the filmmaking process and the transformation of the film into what it is now. It's a movie.
I have participated actively in the raising of the child that is this film, and I love this film, and you know, I want what's best for the, you know what I mean? So like just like everything that was done with this film, it was just done with love.
The best thing that happened was at Sundance. People were coming in to see the film once, twice, if they can get tickets again. You know, if we were at a party of other filmmakers, a huge chunk of the night was spent recounting, did you get this connection with this part of the film? I saw this lined up against that. And though we had worked on the film and seen it bajillion times, you know, the way in which this film keeps circling back on itself to add layers and layers of meaning, I think is one of its greatest gifts.
I feel an incredible gratitude to the people who helped me make this. Because when you travel around the world and you see what people have lived through and died, how people have died that no one remembers, that no one acknowledges. When you see those things over and over and over again, there is a need to say, I saw that, I saw you, you matter to me. And, you know, like, So carrying all of that, like I've been trying to express it, but you realize like, okay, if you can't express it, what does it matter? Well, it matters. And so that people help me find the way to express it is deeply meaningful to me. And it also says to me, wow, somehow this life of art and making things, it's generative. It empowers other people. It helps people be brave. It helps people survive violence. It helps people laugh when things are as fucked up as they can be. And so right on, like, let's do more of it. And yet it's really hard and really problematic, and we make no money and all these things, right? How do we survive? But it's a way of being human, trying to make things that are as extraordinary as the things other extraordinary people have managed to make against all the odds. Like, let's do it.